So I've been reflecting on the Silver Case, and with the recent release date announcement of No More Heroes 3, plus Henry Cooldown's slick redesign by Silver Case artist Takashi Miyamoto, I felt compelled to drop some general thoughts on this game. First though, I wanted to give some pretext behind the game before I talk about some things I adore and what may make it inaccessible to some people. Koichi Suda, or Suda51, is known for darker stories, with his debut being a job he barely got at Human Entertainment to direct a Fire Pro game, where he spawned controversy by turning away from the norm by including extremely dark themes and a full narrative where the protagonist ends up killing himself at the end of the game. After this, he even received death threats from fans of the series.
As for the reaction to the ending, it was really kind of a big deal at the time. Back then, the internet wasn't necessarily as prevalent as it is now. In Japan, we had this forum called Nifty, where people would communicate with each other really simply online. But most of the communication and contact we'd get from fans and users were in the form of postcards. And when we'd get postcards about the Fire Pro games, it would be like, hey, I want you to put this wrestler in the game, or hey, I want to see this move in the next game. Mainly stuff like that, with people saying, hey, love the game, didn't like the game, or whatever. But once we put the game out and people saw the ending, we started getting these huge cardboard boxes just filled with postcards, and almost none of them were nice, fuzzy, happy messages. Most of them were saying stuff like, what the hell did you do with that ending? What's wrong with you? F you, die. People were really kind of upset about what we did, and it really blew up. I was a bit surprised, but at the same time, what are you going to do, really? It really was a huge deal for myself and for the company for a while afterward.
He then would direct the Syndrome games at Human, Twilight Syndrome and Moonlight Syndrome, which saw difficulty releasing due to censorship because of similarities to child murders recently in Japan when the game was coming out. Suda had this to say about it. Well, the Silver Case is about chasing a serial killer, trying to catch him. But for Moonlight Syndrome, the main character is actually just a psychopath. And one of the main problems, he was cutting people's heads off, exactly what happened with the Sakakibara murders, so there were a lot of things that were just too close to real life. That's why we weren't able to make it the way they wanted to. We didn't have that problem with Silver Case. And to this day still, these games are inaccessible to Western audiences, which is unfortunate not only because these seem to be very interesting games, but because Moonlight Syndrome actually serves as the direct prequel to the Silver Case. After these first games under Human, Suda would leave and found his own company, Grasshopper Manufacture, and it is here he first made the Silver Case with his very limited budget and team. The Silver Case revolves around a future in which Tokyo has formed a 24th ward, and there is a huge serial murder case surrounding Kamui Uehara. There are two scenarios in the game, which showcase the perspective of two different characters. The transmitter scenario follows the perspective of mute character Akira, which the player can also name if they wish. Akira is taken into the Heinous Crimes Unit in the 24th Ward, a sometimes unprofessional police unit responsible for dealing with the more reprehensible crimes in the 24th Ward. In this scenario, you work alongside other detectives like the charismatic but unempathetic Kusabi Tetsugoro, who believes in extrajudicial killing of criminals, seeing crimes as a sort of virus which can only serve to inspire more crime. The other scenario, Placebo, follows Tokyo Morishima, a freelance journalist that is very hard on money. The scenario seems to follow much more of a relatable perspective at times, showing a more ordinary person's reflection on events that characters in Transmitter can sometimes seem unaffected by. Also, in terms of the actual reading in the game, the Placebo reports can literally fill gaps in understanding of events you may have misunderstood from the mute perspective in Transmitter. These two perspectives are generally meant to be played one after the other, alternating between the two perspectives as you unlock a Placebo report for each Transmitter case finished. The Placebo reports serve as sort of complementary to the Transmitter counterparts, showing the same events that you had already seen. The difference between these two scenarios can easily be explained by the fact that they are both written by completely different people. Suda is actually only responsible for writing Akira's scenario Transmitter. Tokyo's scenario is actually written by Masahiro and Sako Kato. And if you're familiar with Suda, this actually makes the writing of Transmitter make much more sense. He's much more focused on thematic writing than other things, making some things feel rather open-ended. He enjoys inviting the player to think about the themes rather than giving a nice, neatly wrapped ending. This is especially true for the ending of The Silver Case itself, which does not wrap up every single loose end in the story, but rather gives the player a lot more to think about, which can be unsatisfying upon immediate completion of the game for some. This, combined with what can be extremely exhausting reading, can make the game a very daunting experience, and I recommend not picking up another game in the series immediately after finishing this one, due to the way the writing attempts to engage the player and think post-experience. Touching more on the thematic writing of Suda, this game might as well be the first of his Kill the Past franchise, due to the inaccessibility of the Syndrome games. The games in this franchise are connected by their linked universe, though some have alternate timelines in said universe, and connection to the titular theme Kill the Past, which is either directly referenced in the games or is just a theme that is present in the game. This theme is often interpreted differently among fans, but the way I interpret it is that Suda believes that one should not be caught up in their past, but rather focus only on things relevant to one's present. Unfortunate characters in the franchise are presented as those who cling too tightly to their past, being unable to change or doing irreversible things as a product of this. The Silver Case also focuses on a multitude of other themes though, like revenge, determinism versus free will, and the circumstances of crime.
たまたまそれを描くときに一番良かったのがテーマとして扱いやすかったのが犯罪というもの。なぜ犯罪は生まれるのか、なぜ人は犯罪を起こすのか、それは社会の仕組みの中から起こるものなのか、それとも都市が起こすことなのか、それとも個そのものなのかっていう、それをテーマにしてさまざまな角度から一つの事件というものを捉えていきたいと思って。
The game showcases numerous philosophies towards crime without making any definitive statements, but you could say it leans heavily into fighting against the idea of dehumanization of criminals, as we see more stubborn characters and their morals like Kusabi being directly confronted for their beliefs by events that show hypocrisy, not to spoil too much. The difference between these two scenarios does not end completely at a difference in writing style, though. The artists are actually completely different between them in order to sell this idea of a completely different perspective. Sometimes this can lead to confusion when characters can seemingly look like different people between the two scenarios. For instance, seeing Tokyo in his apartment to question him in Transmitter may be completely missed, as Tokyo's character portrait looks nothing like any of the portraits of him from Placebo thus far. A really great instance of this difference between perspectives is actually that scene in particular though. As Akira meets Tokyo in his apartment, it is seemingly an ordinary interaction besides Tokyo's inflammatory reaction. However, playing the Placebo report right after shows this interaction as very intimidating for Tokyo, with Akira having a very menacing aura about him, reminding Tokyo of past events in the game. One of Suda's strongholds has always been character writing, and it's no different here. Characters are all very unique from one another and feel generally consistent and realistic based on their circumstances. This is really well seen in the character dynamics, specifically the relationship seen between Kusabi and his partner detective Sumio Kodai. A usually more level-headed character than Kusabi, but someone he holds a lot of respect for. The best strengths of the character writing in this game can be seen in their relationship, as it reflects major events that happen and change each other. The game's characters are also rather crude, with homophobic and ableist slurs being quite commonplace among some conversation. It doesn't particularly feel out of place considering the setting or release of the game, but I did find it rather surprising this was included in the 2016 translation. Some may find this dialogue makes the game more realistic, but I could understand if it could make others uncomfortable and avert them from the game. Though the biggest issue with the writing is the rather inconsistent pacing. Some may find the large majority of the game to be quite the slog. Even if you do enjoy the reading, the pacing manages to ramp up near the end in a pretty rushed way. If you don't pay attention, you might find confusing character motives and circumstances at that point. The soundtrack in this game is phenomenal, composed by Masafumi Takada. Some might already know him from possibly his most popular work, composing for the Danganronpa series. He believes that music is at the very forefront of game experience and shouldn't be background noise. He even says himself, "When you play video games, the game space is just what's on the front of the TV, but the rest of the space in your environment, the whole area around you, is completed by the sound. When games are built from the beginning, they're made without sound, and when you add the music and the sound, you're giving life to the game." Takada's style is characterized by a heavy use of leitmotifs, making certain ideas or people associated with certain melodies and using them in multiple compositions for a narrative effect. The technique I used in The Silver Case is called the leitmotif technique. It's through this that I try to achieve that sense of nostalgia. The same technique is often used in operas, where a specific melody is used for a specific character. So the soundtrack selection is based on and coupled with the character in action. For example, you have two characters with separate motifs for each. If the both characters appear at once, you would blend the two melodies. Using this technique, in addition to Silver Case's main motif and theme, the tunes are rearranged over and over for each important point in the game. And this can actually be seen directly in The Silver Case. Take, for instance, the theme of Detective Kusabi. Then listen to the theme of Serial Killer Kamui. Takada then takes both of these melodies and combines them in this soundtrack, heard when Tokyo meets up with Kusabi and Sumio while they are on a stakeout. It's a great combination of the two melodies, but also serves a larger purpose in the narrative of the game. The Silver Case's soundtrack always feels very suited for every situation, complementing each feeling and theme present when used. Some favorites of mine are the more darker theme, His Room, used in Akira's apartment, the surreal Kokusai building theme, to Investigation, which just generally fits the 90s future detective vibe. Takada has said, "After you've played the game, when you listen to just the music, I want players to be able to remember the feelings they had at that time and their feelings of that era." And he's very successful in that regard. Re-listening to the OST reminds you easily of scenes in the games after you've played it, even after so long, because of the successful use of the leitmotif. And at this point, I'm just trying to extend this conversation because I love the soundtrack in this game so much, but I have to show the song Public Security as well, where the piano used is just amazing. Also, this game has quite a lot of unreleased songs used throughout the game, which YouTube account Placebo has luckily collected most, if not all, into one video, which you should definitely go give a listen to as well if you're interested. Something that makes the game stand out from other visual novels is the obvious film window presentation, which was born out of financial constraints of Grasshopper manufacture upon creation. The film windows in the game act in a similar manner to that of a comic panel, where specific framing can be used to convey different things. Unconventional placement of film windows is often used in the game, though similar formats are used in repetition in order to show more casual moments, like the HQ transmitter or Tokyo's apartment in Placebo. However, unlike a comic, the Silver Case has the benefit of being a video game, which means the use of multiple forms of media in the film windows, from animation to still art to even live action segments.
One thing that really kind of stands out is nowadays people have smartphones and PCs. Technology has really kind of become easier to get your hands on, so pretty much anyone can take a video and edit it, add effects and things like that. But at the time, that wasn't the case. When we made this opening, we had to take a proper TV-style camera around the city and film a bunch of stuff, and then bring that into a studio and have it all edited. Today, it could be done a lot easier, but at the time, it took a lot of work. This part right here is Akihabara in Tokyo. Even making this opening here, I had to go into the studio in Akasaka for days and days doing the direction for it, the tiny tweaks and adjustments, and helping out with the editing. It's really nostalgic.
Though I believe the multimedia presentation is at its worst when the game shows you 3D FMV cutscenes, where the characters are actually modeled in 3D. The characters modeled in 3D don't feel charming, like 3D models in sequel Flower, Sun, and Rain, but rather just feels awkward and out of place in the silver case, breaking immersion when used. Luckily, there are only really 2 instances I can think of where these types of cutscenes are used. To touch on the remaster, the cutscenes are seemingly not upscaled in any way, which could be a positive or a negative to some. I personally find it to complement the general aesthetic of the game. The 3D environments were actually remastered and were remastered quite well to fit the aesthetic.
We originally submitted some graphics that were much higher poly, much higher texture quality than is actually in the Silvercase HD that will be released and that's already available for demo on Steam. And it was rejected. Too beautiful, too nice, not enough Silvercase. And so we went back through, we took out some polys, we reduced some texture quality, we changed the lighting to be more surreal aesthetic that's real-like, but not real.
While talking about the actual game design, I think it's important to bring up one prevalent thing in the game. All text in this game is introduced by a rather loud sort of typewriter noise. The text noise can be obnoxious at first, but I tuned it out for the most part as the game went on. Sometimes the text noise can even feel satisfying for shorter statements, but maybe that's just me. However, this text noise is definitely used to heighten different scenes, like one during the prologue, where it is over a repeated statement, really driving the insanity of the scene as a sort of earworm. Perhaps the biggest barrier to entry beyond dense reading is the most dated aspect of the game, the actual gameplay sections. These sections involve movement with place positions to move to, sort of like a grid. It is somewhat reminiscent of classic Megami Tensei dungeons, but instead of fighting demons in these sections, you are essentially doing nothing beyond basic puzzles, which are somewhat optional in the HD remaster. I'm not sure, I didn't really understand the search button on the puzzles because I tried to do them regardless. The Silver Case is more of a straightforward visual novel, unlike Danganronpa or Ace Attorney, which use visual novel and more gamey elements. And that's the larger issue. The gameplay sections in this game don't do anything that couldn't really be done with just normal reading sections or cutscenes with better direction. They don't serve a larger purpose to the structure of the narrative like a trial in Ace Attorney does. However, I'll say this movement does work in the placebo scenario quite well, as I believe the manual short movements for every single day of Tokyo's life serve a purpose in making it more immersive, selling the feeling of Tokyo's monotonous schedule. Wake up, move a little bit, check your turtle, check the window, check your emails. When booting up the game, I thought this would be a trudge through, as gameplay sections did indeed feel incredibly dated, with essentially the entire prologue case taking place in this gameplay style. However, these sections end up being few and far between, but can still be quite tedious, like in a certain mall section or an ending section with multiple towers where you have to climb each one, moving one floor at a time, and check every single room for what you need to find at this point in the game. Overall, I have to say I wholeheartedly recommend this game to anyone who is interested in experiencing it. But I also have to warn that experience may involve some trudging and dealing with tedious game design at points. Also, another thing I just wanted to mention is, just starting off this game, you most likely will not understand what is going on in the prologue. Neither did I. This is actually because the prologue is a direct sequel to the aforementioned never localized Moonlight Syndrome. So this is another thing to keep in mind if you find yourself lost regarding the story in the prologue, only for the characters in said prologue to later become irrelevant anyway, as the real story takes off. Otherwise, The Silver Case is a masterclass in atmosphere and immersion with some amazing concepts, themes, and characters at its core. However, it might take a lot of effort cracking to really dig deep at that core.